Шановні друзі, можемо розпочинати.
Good afternoon, dear friends. Today, in Ukraine Crisis Media Center, we have one more event in the series of events of the Ukrainian Institute. And we study data, information that help us develop cultural diplomacy. And today we have a marathon of discussions dedicated to perception of Ukraine abroad. And the Ukrainian Institute, together with the Renaissance Foundation, and with think tanks InMind and Council Ukrainian Prism, a council, and we held events in Poland, Germany, Hungary, France, USA, and China. And today we are going to speak about 3 reports on Japan, Turkey, and US. And before this, we organized a panel presentation in order to speak why research is important in the context of the state policies, why we need them, and how Ukraine is perceived abroad in the context of our culture and the history, and how this knowledge that we got during this year, how we may use it in practice. And today we are joined by our wonderful speakers. Emine, Deputy of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Oleksandr Sushko, Executive Director of Renaissance International Fund, and Bondarchuk, Director of InMind company. They did part of research. And remotely we are joined by Nadiia, Bureiko, Director of Ukraine Abroad Analytical Center of Ukrainian Prism Foreign Policy Council. We thank you for your time. I'm Volodymyr Sheiko, and I'm a General Director of the Ukrainian Institute, and we commissioned this research. First, I would like to speak about the project and why we needed it. First, Ukrainian Institute started its work 2 years ago, summer 2018, and together with our team, we understood that in 30 years of independence, practically there were no systemic and in-depth research how Ukraine is perceived abroad, how Ukraine is perceived by foreigners in the context of our cultural diplomacy, in the context of cultural representation of Ukraine in the world. And we as a new institution had to improve the image of Ukraine abroad, and we didn't know for sure what image we have abroad and what opportunities we have to improve this image in the sphere of cultural diplomacy. And we needed to find a point of reference from which we would be able to follow the dynamics of international perception of Ukraine abroad and how it changes with time. This knowledge, this information existed in the heads of many people, many who worked at the international arena in the sphere of culture. Ukrainian diplomats, representatives of diplomatic institutions, they accumulated individually and collectively a big mass of information connected with this. And we understood that each of us, we have our own views on this topic, and we have some biased views how Ukraine is voiced abroad and how it should be presented, and we decided to fill the gap and to carry out a research that would be comprehensive. It would include positions and thoughts of experts, of different people who are involved in cultural representation of Ukraine abroad in order to get some representative and broader data that will be a basis for our activity, for the activity of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and of diplomatic institutions of Ukraine abroad. And this is not a research that is a sociological one. We studied the population of foreign countries, but this is too costly to do this. This may not provide us with the proper conclusions. For example, that in one country 30% perceive Ukraine in a good way and others do not. It is difficult to say what are these people, how we may get to them, what messages they need, what they need, what information they need to get. So we work with different segments, starting heads of institutions, representatives of power at different levels, diplomats, NGOs representatives, media representatives. They are interested parties concerning Ukraine in the sphere of cultural diplomacy, and we were able, through the method of in-depth interviews, we were able to get a lot of sometimes even surprising information about the issues that we've raised in our survey. So we will speak a little bit later on during this panel and during others. We won't make spoilers now, but before starting our conversation, we would like to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, ambassadors who work in the countries where we carried out surveys. We thank them, and we thank Renaissance Foundation. They started this project in 2018, and we thank Oleksandr for co-financing of this survey and for the help with information of sampling and for practical advice. Due to your in-depth experience, and this make our research really important. And for InMind, and we thank InMind NGO for your work, because you collected these results. And also we thank the team of the Ukrainian Institute, Marina Yusuf, Alina Alieva, Yuria Gnat, Ksenia Kalinika, Tatiana Linik, and other colleagues who carried out this survey, and they helped us to make it better. We would like to start with you, Emine, and we would like to speak why in the work of the Foreign Ministry it is important to have verified data. Do we have proper results on this? How these things are perceived, especially concerning the work that was started by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and about those decisions that are taken in the sphere, whether they are based on data that is collected, that is structured in a proper professional way. Thank you, Volodya. I would like to greet everyone who is here with us today, all the panelists, those who watch us online, those who listen our discussions, and all participants. And today, also I would like to thank Ukrainian Crisis Media Center team, InMind, and Renaissance Foundation, and we would like to thank our Mr. Kosowski and all our diplomats who helped us to carry out the survey. Answering a question, Volodymyr, I would like to focus on 3 points that I would like to speak about in my speech. Verified data and expertise that becomes the basis for the documents for our ministries. So now we work a lot on some different strategies. And in the sphere of public administration, we see that everyone writes some sort of strategy. Each ministry, each department, they write their own strategy. And this is, I believe, is an important step. And I analyzed such documents and the strategies. They are built on expertise-based solutions. and in-depth research is carried out, and they are the basis of strategic view. And we understand that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs we not only implement this, we are the leaders of this process. And today we'll have a meeting at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we will approve 2 more documents that were elaborated, the strategy of public diplomacy and communication strategy. And they're based on the data we worked with and the research that we carried out, and many stakeholders helped us in this concerning perception of Ukraine, concerning narratives about Ukraine, and how we perceive ourselves. And the first argument that is really important is that we should be able to take decisions, to develop strategies that outline the work of the departments and based on expertise. And this process is now implemented. And cultural diplomacy, this is the new area of competence, new function for Ukrainian diplomats. And now we introduced the reform, and we provided proper structure of the Department of Public Diplomacy and Communications. We introduced new areas such as strategic communications and also operative communications department. And we now are moving in the context of the strategy that will soon be announced publicly. This is the strategy for 5 years. It is well correlated with strategies of the Ukrainian Institute, and this movement goes in one vector, in one direction. So why these countries, Japan, Turkey, and US, why we chose them? So our priority is not only Europe. Of course, we want to be participants. We would like to join NATO and be members of the European Union. And at the last conference of the president with the ambassadors, he said that we should also move to Asia region, and Japan is the leader of the region. And in this Asian strategy that was presented by the Minister Dmytro Kuleba, I believe this is a really important area to integrate such countries as Japan. And I hope that this data will become a really useful source for us in order to bridge the gaps concerning perception of Ukraine in the world. For example, 2 years ago, the Ukrainian Institute presented one more research that was elaborated together with the Brain Finance. And this was about the participation and position of Ukraine in the global rating of soft power. And it was interesting for me to see the results. Maybe some negative perception. We may see that our influence is different, how we see ourselves and how we are seen from abroad. And there is a big gap between these 2 perceptions. And this is not a negative context in our discussion. And this is a big source of understanding that we need to do our home task concerning elaboration and improvement of this image. Authority, our reputation, people use different words, but this should lead to capitalization of this reputation, and it should influence economy. Turkey is a strategic partner. It is really interesting for us in the context of the Black Sea security and in the context of occupation of Crimea. And the Crimean platform also is important in this context. The context between contact between Ukraine and Turkey is really important. We had contacts between the presidents and contacts between different ministries, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and on the 9th and 10th of April, we'll have a meeting of the High Strategic Council, and President Zelensky will go to Turkey, and they will discuss political and military cooperation, and together with Recep Erdogan and President Zelensky, they will have a meeting. And about US, we will improve our bilateral cooperation. There is new administration and policy changes, and also Ukrainian ambassador Oleksandr will be appointed, and we believe that this will be a positive track, and it will be interesting to see because for us, the support of U.S. By partisan support and the military and financial support of U.S. is really important for us. This is an important track for us. So geography is not something that appeared in the heads of the workers of Ukrainian Institute. This is the strategic approach. And the last one is that we need to work on positive characteristics, positive traits we will be associated with. I often participate in different discussions with diplomats and international experts that say that first Ukraine was perceived as the country of Volodymyr, now that the country territories of which are occupied in Donbass. So both things are important, but we should find a powerful narrative. And we are a country that, despite having foreign aggression, we continue to move to the European values and to global approaches and transformation, and the search of such traits is really important. And we should build communication, and it won't happen tomorrow. These traits, they should live in a space. They should be communicated in different formats and by different instruments, including instruments of cultural diplomacy.
And they have to also be of importance. And what we are doing now, we're presenting this research. We're looking for senses, and then we include these senses into specific events. In the language of bureaucracy, it sounds like the plan of events. We are all the time approving all these plans, but all the agencies also have their own plans of events, but they should become the KPIs of how Ukraine is perceived, not just abroad, but it's also about communications, about reforms, about the decisions, so that we shorten the distance which we still have. Thank you, Emine, for a very good analysis, and we understand how this survey is connected with further steps and strategies implemented in the Ukrainian Institute. And thank you for talking about perception gap. It's how Ukraine perceives itself and how abroad it's perceived. In our event a couple of days ago, which was about the global rating of soft force, the survey of a British company showed that in Ukraine this gap is one of the biggest in the world. Very often we overestimate how we are perceived and how we are recognized abroad. And that was confirmed by this survey, where we basically tested more than 115 names of famous people, and that is our internal cultural pantheon. And we found out that 97% of our respondents, and these are expert community, they don't know much about Lesia Ukrainka, for example, about Taras Shevchenko, about Oleksandr Dzheppar, or about our contemporary artists. We need to understand that such surveys help us to understand this perception gap and also to understand what to do with that. Oleksandr, let's move to you. I would like to quote what you wrote on Facebook today, where you announced today's event. You wrote that you have been many years in public diplomacy and presentation of Ukraine abroad and promoting Ukrainian interests and democratic values inside the country and outside. And you wrote that we always lacked such surveys. What is the border when it's not enough to make use of own expertise, but when you have to involve some outside experts. That is important for us, where, in which situations Ukraine lacked data to develop own policy or activities in different spheres. Thank you. First of all, greetings to Ukrainian Institute of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and partners who have been working on this survey. I am convinced that all the material you received will help both the state and also diplomatic service, and not just democratic service, but all those who work with foreign audience will help in this or that way, as well as it will help active citizens who are in public diplomacy at non-governmental level to understand better the countries where they work. Thank you for reminding me. From my own experience, I can talk about dozens of cases when there was a lack of understanding of what will work to what audience, which arguments, which facts we can use to achieve communication goals better. If we look retrospectively, I really participated in many of such strategic events. That was promotion of our policy of European integration, also issues of visa-free regime. We communicated that in different countries for dozens of years, for many years. The issue of integration to NATO, and that is what we were promoting both in the United States and in Europe. Many of bilateral issues when we communicated with representatives of Poland, Germany, France, and in each of the cases, we found out that you need to be very careful with selecting arguments or facts for each of these audiences. When an expert, when some public activist or representative of culture goes somewhere, it's probably easier when this is a representative of cultural environment. The cultural performance doesn't require direct translation, but when you communicate with experts, journalists, leaders of public opinion in different countries, very often, and that's from my personal experience as an expert and from my experience as an organizer of many visits and programs and public diplomacy, on the one hand, I personally lacked some material which I could use to understand what people know in the country about you, what are the stereotypes, what are expectations, what knowledge, because there are some historic similarities which could resonate with some own historical, cultural perception of people. But this all has to be systematized, not just based on your understanding, but based on a certain empiric basis. And that was what we lacked for many years. And for experts whose work I observed, we can talk about different elements of such experience. But what was happening? Experts or some public figures were working on what they were working on the messages that they were using here, certain facts which were obvious for us. For foreigners, they believe that they have to work same way for foreigners. We were talking about our experience. We were saying why the doors need to be open for Ukraine. We worked with different audiences, and very often it was not effective and efficient. We achieved many changes as to attitude to Ukraine, but we understand that the audience is to be analyzed, examined. We shouldn't just bring some conclusions and translate them as if the audience is ready to perceive such conclusions which were formed inside the country. So that is a very good step. I understand that many will need it irrespective of where people work, whether these are artists or people who are in educational sphere, in social sciences, or those who are conducting reforms. There is this need present always. And for the state, I believe, to develop more sustainable and consistent strategy outside, this is what we will need. You mentioned some of the surveys presented this week. A few weeks ago, there was a survey of public opinion published. There are a lot of interesting data there. Yesterday, the Prime Minister, or the day before yesterday, in Germany, he used this data. He underscored that the German public opinion is quite positive as to Ukraine's future membership in the EU. We didn't expect it to be 40%, but that's on certain conditions. We will not just go there and say, well, you support us, why Ukraine hasn't gained the status of the country member. This works. And if the survey of public opinion gives a wide picture, the expert interviews, they give us answers to more applicable issues. What is working, how it's working. Either we need to add up in informational awareness campaigns or cultural awareness campaigns. So I'm happy that we, as Renaissance Foundation, we believed immediately that this is the right way and we support it. And we will be participating in it, and we hope that this will be something that many will make use of. Thank you, Oleksandr. Thank you that you emphasize the practical results of such surveys. I believe that in our political and social culture, there's quite a problematic when we talk about how to do it just as the analysts recommend them. And it's good you mentioned that the Prime Minister is quoting some of such surveys. We would like these results to be used so that, and I would like to tell our audience that all these reports are available on our website. You can download them from the website of the Ukrainian Institute. And now I would like to give the floor and to talk. I'd like to give the floor to Olena Bondarchuk, who will tell about how the project was, how the project started, why we decided to do that survey this way. After many discussions, we decided to do it this way. And I would like to request our presenters to speak a little bit slower. We would like to help our interpreters. I would like to start from thanking you that you gave us, that we have this honor to conduct such survey. The team that was involved into the project was very emotionally excited because we are dealing with something very important, to find the contact with the experts who were quite open was important, and this allowed us to register whether there is this gap that we are talking about or not. That was quite an important task. We had to research how Ukraine is perceived, what are expectations from its cultural product, what are impressions from the cultural diplomacy and from cooperation. When it comes to multi-structural phenomenon, it's better to start from expert survey, because experts are the subjects who have the concentrated experience, and they can provide the whole spectrum of ideas, because every expert can give an assessment of trends in own country, in own sphere, besides expressing own opinion. We selected 3 directions of work talking about selection of respondents. First of all, these are people who are directly involved into creation of cultural product, representatives of different spheres of culture, performance, arts, music, education, civil society, and institutional agents in these spheres. Also part of experts were people dealing, who were close to authorities. The ambassadors of Ukraine in different countries and ambassadors of other countries in Ukraine, those who are present ambassadors and also former ones. Also representatives of authorities of different countries participated in this survey, and these are people who are responsible for policies in the sphere of education, music, culture. Another direction of our work was, representatives of expert community, Ukrainians abroad, diaspora. On the one hand, we had people who were closer related to Ukraine, who could give their own vision, and people who were not so much closely connected, who had probably some other vision. And this wide spectrum allowed us to cover by this survey a lot. I would also add, talking about the cultural layer. We were dealing with experts that were selected according to 2 criteria. The expert had to approach it formally and had to be a respected person, an authority in the sphere that was represented. And so after, one of the experts said that after the interview with you, I feel myself to be a cultural barbarian. This survey was not just collecting information, but it indirectly had an impact on the agents with who we were talking. And I would also add that despite the fact that experts that participated in the survey, these are people who are quite busy, but once they agreed to interview, very often we would agree about 1 hour of interview, but very often people were ready to talk about that for 2 hours. And that was the sign of interest, and also the sign that the country is not enough represented abroad. And it meant that there's some hunger for cultural product.
Thank you very much. It was really interesting experiment concerning this testing concerning names in Ukrainian culture, and we divided it into parts. The first part, these were those names that we believe that these are definitely Ukrainian, and we consider Ukraine broader. We added those people who represent Crimean Tatar culture, Jewish culture, Jewish identity of Ukraine, and belonging of these people is not particularly ethnic, but they belong to Ukrainian culture in a broader sense. And other names, the names that may raise discussions, they may belong to different national cultures. And there are some confusion because they may belong to different cultures, different nations. And we were interested what is known about these people. And this may be Ukrainian, Russian, Jewish, American identity. So respondents, they usually associated these people with other countries. So I was surprised when I read the report. I was really surprised by this information, and I would like to ask Nadiia from Ukrainian Prism Foreign Policy Council, what were the insights connected with the communication with the respondents? What were the main insights in this? Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Volodymyr, for organizing this event. And I would like to thank all the team that supported this initiative, this research we speak about today. Ukrainian Prism Foreign Policy Council studied 3 cases: perception of Ukraine in US, in Turkey, and in Japan. For us, this was really important and interesting experience. And I would reduce it to 3 main points, but they all relate to the necessity of holding such surveys concerning Ukraine, not only abroad but also in Ukraine. These surveys were initiated by the state institution, and this is a big step for Ukraine. Why so? First, the practice of development and implementation of project activity of those state institutions that work in the sphere of foreign policy, public cultural diplomacy. In the leading countries of the world, these activities are based on data-driven, empirical-driven research. First, they study how the country is perceived abroad, about perception of this country, how these perceptions are formed based on what and how they are transformed, and later on they build the work concerning practical things, and maybe with exclusion of some force majeure that need some reactivity. in some types of activity. But if we exclude these force majeure circumstances, we believe that we should have a natural approach. The algorithm, when we first study how we are perceived, what people know about us, what is expected from us, and then we use it as a basis for our movement ahead. And one of the best examples, I believe, is the United States of America. We know that there are many think tanks, analytical centers that work in this area, and they have a leading role there. This is about practical dimension. This is about importance of this research. And for Ukrainian Prism, this was an important aspect. We understood that this research are really new for Ukraine, and now they are implemented in state institutions. And the second aspect, it come out from the scientific conclusions, those experts who analyze foreign policy, the efficiency of foreign policy, those who measure some categories in international relations like influence, force, they identified that foreign perception is really important. The state or international organization, they should be well perceived abroad. And one of such research is the research about how the European Union is perceived in different regions and different countries of the world. Those perceptions may be studied in different ways. Today they mentioned the sociological surveys. Depending on the aim, you may study overall opinion of the population. You may study narratives in the media that are able to form public opinion. And we follow the activity of the Ukrainian Institute. We understand that they implemented such survey together with partners. Also, expert opinion may be studied, and this is what we did in this research. We carried out in-depth interviews with experts who have a big influence, and they are involved in decision-taking in politics or in those areas where they work. Going back to this issue concerning importance of such research, they are really important. We are speaking about state institution, the Ukrainian Institute. We are speaking about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they have proper methodology in their approach how to build their practical work. And the third aspect that is really important for us as for the analytical center, and this is about synergy. This research is the example of synergy, of reinforced cooperation with analytical center and state institution from one side, and from the other side, this is about strengthening of cooperation with our partners from abroad. And using this opportunity, on behalf of the Ukrainian Prism, I would like to thank all those who help us in carrying out this research in 3 countries. I would like to thank all the respondents who found time, who wished to participate in this wonderful, insightful communication despite limited time we worked in. Ukrainian Prism Foreign Policy Council has one of its tasks. We see that expert diplomacy should be strengthened and there should be proper work of experts in the field. We have several projects we implement during the last several years, supported by the Renaissance Foundation, and we provided analytical support in foreign policy projects for the departments of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for profile committees of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. And here we are speaking about research where this request for expertise, for analysis, comes from the state institution. And once again, this is a big step if we look at Ukrainian dimension, how this area of public and cultural diplomacy is being built. And when we carried out our survey, we had many interesting insights, and there are many challenges, and I will keep an entry concerning this, and we will go in more detail about each case in our further discussions that we are going to have throughout the day. What is of interest is that each country has its peculiarities, perception differs. These are different narratives, and some things were dismantled later on by experts, and we may perceive some narratives in Ukraine, but they are perceived differently in different countries. And summing up, we as representatives of Analytical Center, Ukrainian Prism Foreign Policy Council, we believe in the value of such research. We believe that for Ukraine, they will become not just a phenomenon, but a sustainable common practice. And maybe in the course of such research in US, in Turkey, and in Japan, we were able to find out some things about the perception of the situation with the virus, about vaccination, and we believe that our diplomats will work properly in this area. And we have less than 10 minutes. And maybe I will give you some spoilers. We provided some theory about why it is important and how this research was done. But please tell us in 1 minute, and I will provide my insights on this. The most important comprehensive conclusions that were surprising for you. 2 examples, please. 2 examples, 2 countries. I was involved in an analytical team. I worked on these cases, US case and Japan case. So this request for cultural product in US, for example, there is a request for more modern representation. Something new is of interest, something that they do not know. In Japan, for example, they have clear orientation to classic products. Classic Ukrainian culture is of interest. All respondents mentioned this in their interviews when we had them. So this specificities in society, how they influence on expectations concerning how we popularize our culture in the future. So this is one example I may mention. Maybe Olena would like to mention one insight more, because you had the survey concerning 4 more countries, but maybe without big spoilers, maybe provide some teaser for us. About cultural product. European countries that we surveyed, the fact that there, in France, Germany, and Poland, they are interested, they have some expectations. They want to get some Ukrainian view on the world problems. In the Ukrainian Institute, we tend to implement in our work and to speak not only about our joys and suffering, but we want to speak about common agenda by the language of culture and art to study those issues that are not really entertaining. So we have several minutes more, and I would like to share my own insights concerning this. Ukraine is still perceived through the prism of our Soviet past, through the prism of Russia, and this is maybe an expected result. But this Soviet and post-Soviet optics really surprises me. We have enough distance from such associations, but it appeared that we don't, and Ukraine should work a lot in order to highlight ourselves culturally, to separate ourselves from this homogeneous Soviet space that levels us down and not bring us up. And this is a challenge for all of us. And the second conclusion is that Ukraine doesn't have sustainable associations abroad. Nearly everyone says that in political and military dimension, the associations remain Russia, war, and Ukraine as a troublemaker. But if we are speaking about non-political associations, the attitude towards Ukraine is rather positive. It is loyal and neutrally positive. And I believe that this is a good foundation to build on this cultural and humanitarian dimension of associations, and to find this for us, these markers with which we would promote ourselves in the world, to have the policy of one voice. State and non-state actors should work on this systemically, because now we have multi-voice representation. We are represented by many actors in the world, and Ukraine speaks in different voices, and we cannot create this one big puzzle. I would like to remind you that we will have 3 more presentations, 3 more discussions. The next one will be dedicated to Japan, then to Turkey, and the last one will be about the United States of America. And I would like to add that the Ukrainian Institute won't stop on this, and this year and the next year we are going to continue with our research in accordance with methodology that we optimized based on the results of these 7 projects. And we will continue to create such research concerning other countries, and we will use results in programs and projects of the Ukrainian Institute. I would like to thank to our dear speakers for your time, for your good feedback concerning this project, for your participation. And we hope that next presentation will be not less interesting and informative. And please study these results. They are available at the site of the Ukrainian Institute for free. Thank you.